social distancing, you say? The future is watching. Welcome to OpCode Virtual Summit.
All right, cool. So why are you all here and what are we here to talk about? So we will be showing a lot of cats throughout this presentation, as mentioned. We'll introduce the concept of purple teaming and how we practice it at Microsoft. We'll also talk briefly about how typical command and control infrastructure works and talk specifically about the C2 infrastructure that we've implemented. We'll also do a deep dive into the APT research that we've done and how we've implemented many TTPs to achieve APT emulation. And lastly, we'll just talk specifically about the different TTPs that we have implemented. So to start off, let's talk about purple teaming. So what is purple teaming? I'll let you all read the formal definition, but basically it's a methodology where the two sides, red and blue, come together and share knowledge with the ultimate goal of making each other better. And for those who aren't familiar, which I'm sure most of you are, with the concept of red versus blue, obviously the red team is impersonating the real attackers and actively trying to break into systems, whereas the blue team is monitoring the attacker activity and trying to detect and evict them from environments. So how does a typical purple teaming exercise work and how do we do it at Microsoft? So typically the red team is issuing attacks against test environments that are stood up specifically for this exercise. And their goal is really to see how they're getting detected, what attacks are being caught, and then use that knowledge to improve their evasion tactics. Whereas the blue team, on the other hand, is monitoring red team attacks and looking for any alerts that may fire. And this allows them to see gaps in their detections and ultimately make improvements. So moving on to our solution. What does purple teaming really have to do with APT emulation? Why are we bringing this up? Ultimately, we wanted to improve this process. We wanted to improve our exercises and make them more efficient. We wanted the blue team to really be able to not just detect red team actions, but detect real APT actions as well. So this drove us to create a tool, which we've named Copycat, to try and achieve this goal. It has a built-in C2 infrastructure. We've also done in-depth APT research, which has helped us to implement many APT tactics, techniques, and procedures in order to achieve APT emulation. And lastly, we've also implemented a lot of custom modules to assist our APT campaigns. So pivoting off of purple teaming, we'll now start to talk about our C2 infrastructure that we've implemented. And you may also be wondering, what does C2 have to do with this? How does C2 help us achieve this goal? Well, first off, we're already using C2s in our engagements, so we're familiar with them and we know how they work. Secondly, they make it really easy to deploy binaries for the different APT groups that we support. And lastly, a C2 allows us to easily run specific commands that are required for a specific APT profile. And I'll hand it off to Jesse to talk about our C2.
Thank you, Katie. And so now let's talk about our C2. In this instance, it stands for both command and control as well as copycat. Next slide, please. First off, let's discuss the high-level infrastructure overview here. On the left-hand side, we have an attacker who's sitting in front of his or her machine, which is noted by that red stack of machines right there. For this talk, we will call that the C2 server. And then from there, the attacker has to have some way to really attack the victim, right? I mean, if you don't have a victim to attack, what's the point of having a C2 server set up? And with most of these C2 frameworks, what ends up happening is the attacker will send off some sort of malicious link, some sort of malicious attachment or email that points to something malicious to the victim, and then eventually the victim does something with that, right? Within our infrastructure here, that is denoted by the first line on the left-hand side. You see that we have the email icon, the paperclip icon, as well as a cloud icon. That really denotes a couple ways that the attacker can send that off. With most C2 infrastructures and C2 frameworks, a lot of times what they call this is like the dropper, then the dropper drops the payload onto like the victim's machine. Sometimes within this step, you also see certain items, especially people who are familiar with Metasploit, it occasionally has like stagers and things like that. We don't have stagers in Copycat itself, at least not on the basic level. We kept it pretty simple for that. But we do have a dropper to deliver the backdoor. Now, once the victim unknowingly clicks on the malicious link or opens up that malicious attachment, the program runs on the victim's machine. And at this point in time, if you look over to the right-hand side, you see that our attacker is now sitting on top of the victim's machine. At this point in time, the machine is compromised. And for this talk, we'll call compromised machine a zombie, but other Other frameworks might reference this as an implant. Sometimes they may call it a bot, some other things. There are all these different terms out there, but we'll call it a zombie for now. Now, once this machine becomes a zombie, it has to establish some sort of communication channel. And for copycat, what we've done is utilize the reverse TCP. So if you look at the middle cat tracks there, the top cat track is the zombie reaching back out to our C2 server, and the bottom cat track is the C2 server communicating back to the zombie itself. Now, it is called reverse TCP because it's the zombie communicating first to the attacker's machine, and then the two-way communication channel that gets established, and they communicate with each other. And then at that point in time, we can utilize the C2 server to send commands, run our APT campaigns, or drop or upload or download data from the zombie machine. A couple things to note, of course, is that this is just one example of a C2 framework, and in particular, what we've implemented for copycat. Of course, reverse TCP protocol, there are a lot of other ways that the attacker machine can communicate with the zombies. Either you have direct TCP. You could also not even utilize the TCP framework. You use UDP, ICMP, and whatever other protocols you can get communication channels going from there. Next slide. So we've looked at the infrastructure in our last slide, and now we're going to talk a little bit about our tech stack. And keeping with our idea of simplicity and making this easy to implement, we utilize only Golang with our entire tech stack. And the main reasons for this is, first off, it runs almost everywhere. We write our Golang code, and we can then compile it or cross-compile it to almost any framework or language, excuse me. So this includes the ability to allow it to run on Raspberry Pis, which has proven to be very fruitful, especially if you want to drop Raspberry Pis in random areas. I don't know, for instance, in conference rooms, or plug it in random ports, plug it in, and then you have your copycat running, and it reaches back out, which is very, very useful for us. And the second reason why we utilize Golang is because it's simple-ish. The reason why I say that is if you have a little bit of experience with some coding languages, and even if you don't, it's fairly easy to pick up quickly and get working code going. And finally, the third reason why we love Golang is because it's fast. Now, if you looked at our talk description, we did promise that we're going to teach you how to build your own C2, and this is our recipe for copycat. Now, with any good recipe, we have our list of ingredients on the left-hand side, and we have our directions on the right-hand side. For the ingredients, we have three main ingredients. First, you need a TCP listener. Second, you need an infinite loop to accept all the incoming connections. And the third item is, for every connection that does come in, you need to have a handler that can actually handle that client's off your implant. Now, in terms of directions, first we want to read the command from standard in or WSS on our C2 server side. Then we want to bake the command a little bit, give it a little bit of love. And what we really mean by that is we want to see if the command is going to be run on a Windows zombie or Linux zombie or whatever other OS is out there. Now, if it's being run on Windows zombie, we want to run the command through cmd.exe. But if it's being run on Linux, then just run it through whatever bash or whatever shell is being running at that time. Now, we also want to check to see if the command is an internal command to copycat itself. Of course, if the command is not or is internal copycat, if we were to send that off to our zombie had no idea what to do with it, it would try to run on the victim machine and say, I have no idea what you're doing, this doesn't work, probably throw an error or something like that. So we do want to make sure we check the command to see if it's internal to the copycat. If it is, runs it on the copycat side. If it's not, then send it off to the victim. Finally, we do send the command to the zombie itself, and then we read the incoming data from our zombie. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the ingredients and code snippets. We all love code snippets. So as we listed before, in terms of our ingredients, we have our TCP listener, we have our infinite loop, and we have our zombie wrangler, which is what we're going to start calling each thread that handles the incoming items. So on the on the right-hand side, the first code snippet is our TCP listener, and what we're doing is we're utilizing Golang's net package to do this. So we're using net.listen to open up the TCP port to start listening. And then afterwards, we want that infinite loop to be running to be constantly open to make sure that as there's zombie connections that are coming in, we are accepting those. And so we have our for loop in our second code snippet that's just running a server.accept and just constantly running, just waiting for those zombies to come in. And then finally, we have our zombie wrangler itself. And going back to our previous point about Golang being simplish as well as quick, you'll see that towards the bottom, we have something called a Go space handle client. And that Go keyword right there is utilizes what's called Go routine. And this essentially allows our code to be multi-threaded, and it creates threads as items are coming in. So it will create a thread for every handle client, a class, to be able to manage each zombie that does come in. So as you can see, that makes our life a lot easier. Going just gives it to us with a single keyword right there. But those are 3 ingredients right there. And then we'll dive a little bit deeper into our directions. I won't go through the directions verbatim again on the left-hand side, but if you look at our code snippets on the right-hand side. So the top part is us processing the command. So it's reading the command from standard in or WSS, and okay, what is this command? Next up, we're doing the baking it a little bit. So you see that it says, is OS Windows? Let's check if it's a Windows operating system. If it is, let's run it through cmd.exe. And then afterwards, we do a little bit of encoding of the message, and then we send off the message to our zombie. And afterwards, we read the incoming data from the zombie, and then we display it back to the C2 server user. Now, next up, Katie's gonna talk a little bit more about our APT research. Katie, you're on mute.
Good call. Okay, cool. Thanks, Jesse. So starting off, we're going to talk a little bit about how we find the campaigns that we're going to implement. So we use a variety of different resources, both internally as well as externally to Microsoft. We start off doing a little bit of research on the APT to understand just at a high level the different TTPs that are used. So we do this by gathering knowledge online from, for example, Twitter or different blogs or RSS feeds. And we also consult with our internal threat intel team, as well as our SOC, to kind of get a good idea about which APTs may be top of mind. Then once we have that foundational knowledge, we then go looking for actual samples and reports that will give us specific IOCs that we can implement. We gather this data from a variety of online resources, including those listed here. And it's important to note some of these are free, and you can look at the samples and reports free of charge, but some do cost money to sign up. There we go. Wasn't wanting to advance. Okay, cool. So once we identify our samples and reports, we then need to figure out exactly what IOCs we want to emulate. So we do this in a variety of ways. We've developed some automation into our tool that does automatic IOC extraction from various feeds and blogs, looking for things specifically like file names and registry keys. And then we also do a bit of manual analysis in addition to automation to extract those IOCs. We look through the reports and code and try to identify things like file names, registry keys, domain names, etc. And lastly, we take the actual code samples that the real APTs used and do a bit of reverse engineering. But of course, we do strip out the malicious parts and try to replace them with something benign, perhaps popping calc instead of the malicious binary, while still retaining the same functionality. So now we've identified our IOCs that we want to emulate. So now we have to implement this into Copycat. So this diagram gives you a high-level view of what this looks like inside of the tool. So basically, we have our threat actor, which can have profiles. And the profiles are, of course, unique to each threat actor or APT group. So those are represented by the fingerprints. Then for each of the profiles, you can have one or more campaigns. And these campaigns consist of 3 different things. So first we have a command file, which lists all the commands that will take place on the victim machine when the campaign is executed. We also have any tools included in the campaign that are used to assist the campaign on the victim machine. And then lastly, we have a README file, which basically just gets an overview of the APT group itself, as well as the different actions that will take place within the campaign. So now we'll move into specific examples of the different profiles as well as campaigns that we've implemented inside of Copycat. So starting off, this first campaign is from the APT group Turla Dark Neuron. This started out as a spear phishing campaign targeted at the Saudi Arabia government. And we've emulated here their initial entry, which was sending a phishing email with a Word document attached containing a malicious macro. So we have implemented the malicious macro as well as other specific IOCs. So here, one example of a specific IOC is the APT's use of certutil to decode and then execute the malicious executable. And then here we have the base64 encoded payload that is decoded and then executed. So for this example, this chunk of code actually triggered an alert by AV. So this forced us to come up with ways to evade the detection. One way that we've done this, or a couple ways that we've done this, on the left-hand side, we add some random string variables just to kind of break up the code and break up the bytes in order to change the file hash. So if there's a detection based on the file hash, that will evade that detection. And as you can see, we're big fans of Godzilla. Another thing we did on the right, you'll see we actually break up that base64 encoding. So since that's exactly what triggered the detection, we want to break that up into different string variables and then concatenate them together. Therefore, the detection on the whole chunk of code is no longer valid. So in addition to the malicious macro for this campaign, we've also implemented the payload that is dropped by the macro. So this payload is the first known backdoor for Microsoft Exchange servers. And this APT utilized DLL sideloading to load this backdoor into the address space of the Microsoft Exchange application. So taking a look at the .NET code, as we mentioned, we do strip out the malicious part of these samples that we get, and we're left with the benign, one might say declawed functionality. And here we showed two main IOCs, which are extracting the web helper DLL as well as the task scheduler DLL. And I'll hand it off to Andrei.
Thank you. We looked first at the Turla backdoor. Right now we're gonna focus on WinNTI backdoor. Probably some of you know this WinNTI backdoor has been known for, I think, starting on 2013 on the Windows side, but relatively recently was discovered for Linux as well. So what we tried here with the backdoor was to implement the functionality and implement unique functions specific to this backdoor, and of course IOCs. And on the next slide, we're gonna go through, for example, some of the things that are implemented that we've done. So right now, the backdoor has some encrypted API names. And as you can see, because the backdoor is written in C, each time we actually write something, we're gonna keep the same language as the original malware. We've ported those as buffers in C. So all the encrypted names were basically, we copy the bytes and imported them as buffers. Next slide is gonna show, if we go back one, please. Yeah, this one basically shows the function which does the decryption of those API names. And in this case, the malware author named the function X, which exactly how we actually kept the name. And then we reversed, in this example, the decryption function. The decryption is just a basic XOR with FE as a key. And then, yeah, basically we ported that to C. And then if we move to the next slide, it's an example, as you can see on the left-hand side. Basically, that's an example of how a profile command file looks like. In this case, this is a simple one. It will just upload our executable, set the executable bit and run it. And this is a simple one. We have more complex one, which will run a series of commands or executables. And then on the right-hand side, you can see it in action. When it runs, it tries to basically decrypt the data, resolve the API names, get the addresses, and so on. And then it's gonna do more stuff specific to the WinNTI backdoor. Now let's go through another profile for another malware related to APT groups. This one is called Canon. What's interesting about this one is it's using email as a C2 channel, basically POP3 and SMTP, to connect, get information, and exfiltrate data. You probably, so as Jesse mentioned earlier, copycat is actually just a basic reverse TCP. However, all the other things like exfiltrating data through email, DNS, or all the other things are based on what different malware are doing, what techniques they're using based on whatever campaign we've analyzed and implemented. So in this case, Canon is using emailers as a C2. So that's what we've tried to do. Basically, we implemented the backdoor functionality, and then of course we emulated the POP3 and SMTP comms as long as specific IOCs. Now, if we go to the next slide, as compared to the other one, which was written in C, this one it's in C#, so makes it much easier to analyze and get data, and then afterward emulate it. In this case, this one sets a persistence in the registry, and then if we move to the next slide, we're gonna see the focus for it was that we basically were trying to emulate the email comms. On the left hand side, you can see the POP3 emulation. So what this one does, it keeps so basically the malware has some hard-coded credentials inside, like username and password. So we kept those, and then we implemented our own fake POP3 mailbox, and as well as a fake SMTP. So with the POP3 mailbox, we let the backdoor login, and then what it will do, each backdoor will have will register with a specific let's say ID, and then it's gonna go through the subjects. For example, it will search for commands for that specific machine. So in this case, we changed the subject to just a red team test email. So what the malware does, it goes through the mailbox, sees, okay, is there a message for me? And if it is, okay, I'm gonna get the message, decode it, and then extract whatever commands. And now, assuming, some commands are run, and we're gonna see in the next slide what kind of commands it supports. Let's go back one slide. It's gonna send data through SMTP. This one, again, it was the same thing. And oftentimes we actually try to keep, let's say, the same domains, or basically domain names. But we're gonna change the traffic in such a way, either to redirect through different methods the domain to a machine that we control. Okay, and then on the next slide, we're gonna see, for example, some data that is able to send, basically a lot of OS information data. And then besides that, also it's able to send screenshots, which are saved as bitmaps. And then on the next slide is just an example of basically the emulated declode malware running. On the left-hand side, you can see it connects to a POP3 mailbox, and it will try to get specific data for the backdoor. And then on the right-hand side, it actually exfiltrates data through SMTP. And now we're gonna go to another profile called Ave Maria, and Jesse will go through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei. And as Andrei mentioned, let's talk about Ave Maria. So this is another profile that we've implemented. And this one here is reportedly tribute to the Fin7 group. Fin7, if you haven't heard, is also AKA known as Carbonac, as well as some other things. They are a very, very successful APT actor out there that has made a lot of money. A lot of times, I think in the last couple of years, if we think about some of the retail or bank getting tagged, may or may not, most of the time may or may not be attributed to the Fin7 group. So anyways, Ave Maria was reportedly attributed to that group. For our goals for Ave Maria, we had two main goals, and the first one was to emulate the UAC bypass functionality that Ave Maria utilizes. And then, of course, the second item is to make sure that we implement specific IOCs. First up, we'll talk about the IOCs themselves. On the left-hand side, we wanted to make sure that we resolve all the different API Windows system calls that Ave Maria makes. So in this instance, you look at our code snippet there, it makes a call out to the RTL get current peb. So we get the process address for that, and we resolve that API. And then We also wanted to make sure that we emulated the dropping the file from the resources within the executable file itself. And so if you look on the right-hand side, one of the resources within the executable was a wm_disp. And so we, as the malware does, we do find resource on that, and then we also load the resource. Some of the other resources that it also includes is a wm_dism as well. So we make sure that any resources that are included within Ave Maria malware, we've also done within our declawed version. And then, as we stated, one of the first goals is to emulate a USB bypass. In this instance, Ave Maria utilized a fairly well-known USB bypass now, which utilizes the package manager.exe. And because package manager.exe, when it reads or when it gets an XML file as an input, it calls out to dism.exe. And dism.exe has a known DLL sideloading issue as it tries to load dismcore.dll. And so in this instance, what it's doing is we create our modified code and we name it dismcore.dll. Then we copy it into the Windows System 32 directory. And then for Ave Maria, we've kept the XML file the same. And for this particular malware sample, it was called eloknack.xml. And we also kept the XML, the stuff within the XML the same. So we input the same XML stuff. For this particular USB bypass, it doesn't really matter what's in the XML. You just need some sort of XML file to pass off to package manager to utilize. But after we've created the malicious or created our XML file as well as our modified DLL, copied it over to Windows System 32, then we call package manager.exe, pass the XML file, calls it to dism. Dism tries to find the dismcore.dll, doesn't find it within or tries to resolve it, looking through its normal paths. And first, it looks within our path of the Windows System 32, sees our modified DLL, loads that, and then executes our code. And Andrei already mentioned this a little bit, but I think some people might have been wondering, why is this so simple? When we were talking about our C2 infrastructure itself, and the beauty of it is, if you look through Ave Maria or Canon or WinNTI or Turtle Dark Neuron, is that we kept it simple because it allows us to really morph the copycat as new APT profiles come out. With every new APT profile, every new technique that's out there, we can utilize those techniques or tactics, and then we can make copycat better and make it more elusive. And so with every new technique comes out, we borrow from the attackers. Like, why not, right? If they've already written the code for us, let's borrow from them and utilize that. And so what we do is then we utilize that to make copycat even better and even stronger. And what's nice is it's constantly changing, it's constantly morphing, which makes it a lot harder for the good guys to try to catch us. And next up, we're going to talk about some demos. Go, Katie.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. Okay, so now we'll see our tool in action. So this first campaign that we're running is for Ave Maria, which Jesse just explained. As you can see, the zombie has connected back to our C2, and we have some creative names that are randomly generated as well. So we issued a help command, and this shows all the possible commands that can be run within Copycat. So we'll start off with the get APT command. So if it's just run by itself, it will list all of the different profiles and campaigns that we currently have supported. And we'll start off with the fin7 campaign. And we'll use the info APT command to basically lay out an overview of what this campaign will do when executed on the victim machine. So as you can see, it prints out just an overview of the actions, as well as a link provided to if you want to go and learn more about this APT group. So we also use get APT command in conjunction with a specific campaign to issue that campaign on the victim machine. So we wanted to make this as verbose as possible to print out all the actions it's taking one by one. So as you can see, it's uploaded to exes, and then that implantreg.exe is carrying out the actions. So running our malicious payload. And dropping those DLLs as well as the XML file that Jesse mentioned. And as we mentioned, we strip out the malicious part, and instead of popping a malicious binary, we decided to pop calc. So the campaign has completed, and you can use the exit ZMB command to disconnect from your zombie. And as we can see on the victim machine, all of the files were created and dropped. Cool, so that's our first campaign. Our next demo is for a Linux-based campaign. So the last one was Windows, so this one will be Linux, which is the WinNTI that Andrei explained. So we've issued the get APT command to identify all the possible profiles and campaigns again, and then we're issuing info APT on the APT 17 profile specifically. So it's a campaign on Linux using the WinNTI backdoor, as we mentioned. We kick that campaign off, and we'll see on the right-hand side when those files get populated. And we can see that that was dropped. Sweet. And our last demo, which is going to be a little bit different. So the first two demos and most of the campaigns we talked about today were pretty in-depth. They involved doing a lot of reverse engineering and implementing specific IOCs. For this one, it's a little bit simpler. We're testing some different kinds of detections that are based specifically on just file names that are dropped on the victim machine. So this particular campaign is the Grand Crab campaign, which basically just uploads all the files that they're all the same names that are associated with the APT, named exactly the way the APT named them. However, all we're doing is just creating those files on the victim machine and then dropping them with the goal of testing the detection on those file names specifically. And those are our demos. Any questions?
Yeah, actually. So one of the question in the chat is, how does your tool compare to something like Caldera?
I don't think we've played with Caldera before. However, we played with a few other frameworks, and most of them actually have all the functionality embedded inside the framework. What we tried to change was basically the framework is something basic, just reverse TCP, like Jesse said earlier. All the crazy, really cool functionality is inside the, let's say, profiles, and then they are specific for each campaign. And we're not trying to implement everything generically, but we're trying to be very specific. And maybe, yeah, either Katie or Jesse can, if you have any other ideas. Or
yeah, I agree with you, Andrei. I just took a quick look at Caldera here, and I think that last statement you said is a differentiation, which is we are looking at existing and the real attacks that are out there, and we're reverse engineering those. Versus Caldera looks like it runs through the attack framework, the MITRE framework, and tries to emulate certain things, but it actually doesn't actually take real life ones and try to attack existing systems. And I think that's the major difference between ours and Caldera.
Okay. And
one other thing was we're also trying to, when we do this, for example, when we try to emulate different APT groups, we can also, for example, do it directly on production, because everything that we do is designed to not be malicious. The model is declawed, we emulate everything, and so on. So yeah, that's another thing.
The next question was, any plans to add Astra Roth attack chain to Copycat?
Oh, which one can you?
Astra Roth.
I think we
actually have
that implemented. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, it's like the kind of questions that are good to have. It's like when you already have.
We have a lot of APT groups implemented there.
Nice. What about Richard Johnson? Is it an APT group? I saw it in one of the.
It's a document name.
Yeah, it is. This one. Yeah, it's just a document.
Is it based on the reverse engineer, or is it just a random name?
So it's straight from the report when we looked up this particular APT group, and then found the report on exactly what they used. Yeah, it's the same name that they used in their campaign.
Okay. Next question was, is everything including targets, choosing, and email sending automated?
Yes.
Oh, pretty cool.
The short answer is yes.
Nice. Well, the next one is not really a question, it's a comment. It's damn, this is amazing. So I guess it's a good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
And last question is, will it be open sourced?
That's a tough question. We're lucky we're allowed to present even this, I would say. Well, kind of joking, but the thing is that we're trying. So we will try to talk to our management to explain this would be very useful to a lot of people, a lot of companies out there. To see, okay, what's exactly their state? Can they protect against this adversary or another adversary, or basically all the adversaries for their industry, and so on. And we know this would be very beneficial. So yeah, that's something we're gonna definitely try. What do you guys think, Katie, Jesse?
Perfect response, Andrei.
Thank you.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. Well, the last comment in the chat is sweet. This was a great presentation. Thanks, guys. Looking forward to the slides. Cool. Well, thank you all for that presentation. I'm glad you managed to get the authorization to speak then.
Yeah, thanks.
And yeah, same thing. Looking forward to the slides. I will send you an email after on where to push them on the GitHub. But yeah, hopefully, like you will get authorization also for the tool. It looks pretty interesting.
Thank you very much.
That's good. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Well, thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.